Hey, Daniel.
Good morning, Tom. I realized I was muted. Morning, Kirsten, Veda.
Morning.
How's the West Coast?
Fairly benign at the moment. Yeah, a little overcast, and I'm just looking out at the water right now. Just a slight ripple on the inlet here.
Well, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, I'll take it. A beautiful walk on the beach this morning.
Nice. Well, I think it's kind of fun. I think we're broadcasting in the boardroom, but no one's in there. So I opted to stay in my office.
Janice is saying,
comforts of home here at the office.
Well, it's 10 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. And first, I'd like to recognize that we are operating from various Nuu-chah-nulth nations and their territories. And I'm specifically in Tloquet First Nation territory here on the West Coast. And I do want to quick notice to any attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded live stream to that famous YouTube channel on the regional district website. And I don't think I'll go through since there is nobody in the boardroom or anything, I'll leave it at that in terms of introductions of board members that are present, but we've got everyone else here, it looks like, on my screen. If I could, I'll move from the chair approval of the agenda. I could have a
Second.
Thank you, Kirsten. All those in favor? Great, motion approved. And if I could also, I'll move from the chair that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on October 6, 2022 be received.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Great, motion carried. Now, well, Mr. Hanson and Marianne, we have a delegation today from WildSafe BC, Pacific Rim. I see Bob there, and I think Marianne probably is with him.
Sorry, Chair Steer. I think Director Siga has her hand up. Not sure if you can see that.
Roger, thank you, Daniel. Veda, please go ahead.
I am so sorry. I just forget to take it down after I voted.
Roger,
I'll just leave my voice on.
Thank you, Veda. Great. So I'll just finish off here with to Bob and Marianne. It's a 10-minute delegation. That doesn't include your any questions from the board here moving forward. I see Marianne up on the screen. Hi, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. Will we be able to share our screen, or will the presentation be put in by one of the committee members?
I will have to defer to my colleagues down there at the HCRD to be able to screen here.
Marianne, you should be able to share to the screen.
So,
Oh, I see a green light there.
all right. All right, so thank you for having us, everyone. My name is Marianne Paquette, and I'm one of the coordinator this year for the Pacific Rim program. And this is my third season with WildSafe BC. And the past 2 seasons, I was working as the Hitachi-Makoa coordinator. So I'll pass it on to Bob.
Yes, thank you to the ACRD and the West Coast Committee for this opportunity to report on the 2022 season of activities for WildSafe BC Pacific Rim. We'd like to acknowledge and express our gratitude for living and working and recreating within the traditional territories of the Toquat, Kalatha, Tloquet, and Ahousaht First Nations. My name is Bob Hanson, and I've been in the role of community coordinator for 5 years. This presentation provides an overview since April of this year of wildlife activity, human-wildlife coexistence challenges, and opportunities seized to help keep wildlife wild and to help keep our community safe. The next few slides will sketch out the overview with help of some highlights describing both lows and highs from the season, and they provide context for the discussion at the end on the roadmap ahead for coexisting with wildlife. So to start off, here are some of the troubling numbers. Just within the last few days, this number increased to 9. So 9 bears lethally euthanized. This number has also changed. It's now at 36 sheds and structures accessed by bears. There were actually 9 outdoor freezers accessed by bears. And for instances where bears access grease, commercial grease bins. 35 vehicles were opened by bears. And 8 chicken coops were also accessed by bears. And 21 unsecured commercial bins accessed by bears. In addition, there were also 51 close encounters, very close encounters, and in 4 instances, people used bear spray. And there were 7 incidents where bears entered buildings with people inside.
So I'll do a little bit of an overview of our activities that took place between mid-April and the end of November. And these activities include, sorry, was there? Oh, sorry, I can hear feedback from myself. Okay. So these activities involve education, outreach, training, and other conflict prevention initiatives. So we delivered 6 WildSafe Ranger presentations to school-age children, reaching a total of 190 students and teachers. We've given 25 wildlife awareness and safety presentations and other types of training sessions, reaching more than 340 participants. We did 5 door-to-door activities in 7 neighborhoods experiencing high wildlife activity, and we delivered information packages to 370 residences. We hosted a display booth where we were able to answer questions about the local wildlife and also attractant management practices with both residents and visitors, reaching over 1,000 people. And we've seen a 10% increase in Facebook followers for the WildSafe BC Pacific Rim page, and we've created over 49 educational posts. We also have now 5 local businesses that have taken the WildSafe BC Business Pledge and have made the necessary changes to create an environment that is safe for their staff, the community, and also the local wildlife. And now we have now 10 more businesses that are working towards the pledge with us, and they're really making great progress. There's 2 campgrounds that have taken the Bear Campsite Pledge and have provided staff training for them earlier this year. There's now 14 electric fences that have been installed and 9 more projects that have had detailed consultations for later on. There's a total of 18 new bear-resistant bins that have been purchased by both residents and businesses. And finally, we've calculated the increase in people reached from 2021 to 2022 and found that there was over 90% increase. And this increase was due to the ability for the program to have 2 coordinators working on initiatives this year. So we also wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to Jody and the whole ACRD team for including us in the educational campaign for the Sort and Go rollout. It was great to be able to collaborate with everyone, and this is a little bit of an overview of the activities we were able to take part in. So we participated in 4 open house events in Tofino, Ucluelet, Hitatsu, and Taistanis. We also had a great time collaborating on the ACRD video dedicated to securing carts from wildlife. We were also really thankful to be able to add input for a Westerly article that discussed bears and also proper bear-resistant cart storage. And we created resource sheets specific to the rollout, and these posters have been shared widely in the community. And we're also able to provide feedback on the new ACRD bylaw regarding attractant management. And lastly, we've been able to collaborate with Surfrider Pacific Rim and Ozark Environmental to add the anchoring mechanisms to the Tofino and Ucluelet displays. And here's a short visual overview of some of the activities that we have done this year. So I'll just play this right now.
All right, thanks, Marianne. To wrap up the presentation, I'd like to talk about the roadmap ahead. And the roadmap ahead is about continuing to strengthen and expand the network of working relationships in West Coast communities and First Nations. The working relationships support extensive teamwork that is increasing our region's capacity to coexist safely with wildlife and increasing the capacity to prevent conflicts. I'll touch on some significant milestones on the roadmap to date, accomplishments that we can build on going forward. So, implementation of Tofino's new wildlife attractant management bylaw is a very significant milestone within the region, and is also setting the stage for work on and hopefully adoption of a similar bylaw in Ucluelet. And we also were able to have some input on recent amendments to the ACRD bylaw. As Marianne touched on with her slide, the ACRD curbside rollout has succeeded in putting 4,200 bear-resistant carts into the hands of residents. That's a major step forward. We have had ongoing discussions, and they are continuing with the districts on moving into consideration of requiring wild-safe waste management practices within business license conditions. And also we've been talking with staff about the idea of a wild-safe handbook for developers. In terms of the requirements for Bear Smart community status, Tofino, with the passing of the bylaw, has now completed all of the requirements to make application for Bear Smart community status. And Ucluelet is right on the verge of meeting all the requirements. And if a bylaw is incorporated for Ucluelet, that application could also go forward. And this is important, I believe, because it sends a clear message to residents and businesses within the region that this is a long-term coexisting with wildlife without conflict is a long-term priority in our communities. We're continuing to work and look for opportunities to expand the access of human wildlife coexistent information within the region. And we've had great collaborations with staff in both the district of Ucluelet and Tavino, and as shown on Marianne's slide on the rollout, also with the ACRD. And we're always looking for those opportunities. And we're actually meeting this afternoon with the new executive director for tourism, Tofino, and exploring or having a discussion on opportunities there. And as part of our presentation, we would like to make a request to support the vision going forward for WildSafe BC. We would like to replicate the success we enjoyed this year in terms of having shared 2 coordinators available 7 days a week throughout the very busy season, and with an ultimate goal of having a coordinator that can also work full-time in the winter with district staff and others on important initiatives that are very difficult to undertake in this busy summers or busy season, but would be quite appropriate to work on in the winter. And with that, I would just like to come back to working relationships. The longest portion of our season end report lists is a very long list of collaborations and working relationships. And we'd very much like to build on that strength and to keep the momentum going. And we're very hopeful for multi-year secure funding from both districts and the regional district as well. So thank you very much. We thank you for your support, your ongoing support, and for your leadership. And it really is great working with you on keeping wildlife wild and our community safe.
Thank you, Bob and Marianne. Maybe Marianne, if you could take this screen share off. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bob, Marianne. Really appreciate. Well, I was fortunate enough to have this not too long ago at the district, but I'd like to open it up to any of our committee members if they have any questions or comments. I know I'll have a couple.
I have a question. What is the trend with the culling of bears? Is it going down? Is it the same year to year?
It's it really is variable. When you I've looked at the numbers going back as far as 2014, and you really see variation year to year to year, and there's always some factors that are out of our control. So this year we had a very wet spring that really seemed to diminish the availability of berries on the landscape. Last year we had a reduced berry crop because of the heat dome. When a fundamental natural food source like that's affected, then that plays into what we experience in our communities with bear issues. So each year is you're starting over each year. It might be a good year, it might not be. We've had 3 really challenging years out of the last 4 years. And what I can say is that our capacity in terms of the prevention work just grows year to year to year. So all of our communities are going in a good direction in terms of our capacity to prevent conflict. And I've heard directly from the CO service the last 2 years that they feel the work that's gone on here reduced the number of bears that were destroyed in this year and last year. They think the numbers would have been much higher. So it's lots of complexity every year.
Okay to speak? Oh, something's happening. I can't hear.
I see my mute. Yeah,
There.
clicked on. Thank you, Veda.
Okay. I was just wondering if I could ask Bob if there's been any work done with forestry and parks on wildlife corridors through the trail systems.
Yes, there is actually an initiative that we've been part of, and it's Indigenous-led West Coast Stewardship Corridor project that envisions keeping a focus on those wildlife corridors and the capacity of the landscape on the West Coast to support wildlife. And it's, as I said, an Indigenous-led initiative. So it's been underway for several years now, and continues. So it's acknowledged and appreciated how important it is to understand our landscape on the West Coast and how that's playing into everything. The availability of natural foods and space for meeting all the requirements for survival for wildlife, that all ties into landscapes.
Yeah, the access for bears to get their coastal food is blocked by the highway, the bike trail, campgrounds. Yeah, so it would be nice to get those in place before the uplands are developed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of big issues there too.
And it would involve parks, forestry, and the communities.
Right now, the focus has been on the First Nations as and it's right on the verge, or it's going in a very encouraging direction that there may be significant support coming to this initiative from Parks Canada in terms of financial resources to move this whole project forward. And it's in, as I was saying, it's under the leadership of First Nations on the West Coast.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the committee? I just wanted to once again thank Bob and Marianne and the delivery of the carts. We just came out in the first organics collection that preceded. This has been an incredible success, and I just wanted to really thank the work that WellSafe BC has done with the ACRD and getting that educational component out. as Bob pointed out, this is a long-term issue that each year it's not start from go again, but every year is a complex year, and identifying those factors each year will be critical in this long-term success. So we recognize that. And I think it alludes to a bit of the conversation at the last part of the presentation, where in terms of WellSafe BC's funding structure, and to find a way to have that long-term sustainable funding so more planning can be done. This is a time of year where WellSafe B has the opportunity when they're not immersed fully. But as we just pointed out yesterday, another bear was euthanized. So it is ongoing, and the ability to plan for the next seasons or upcoming projects. This is a time to do that. So I do really stress that we look at ways to help fund WellSafe BC in the long term, finding that framework for that. And then those small little things like, well, they're not small, but in terms of the educational component around chicken coops, for example, as Bob knows, I'm a chicken farmer here. And I've had great success with the electric fencing, and he's done many workshops in our communities to ensure the safety not only of the bears but of the communities around. So a big shout out on that component there as well. I want to once again to wrap it up, just thank you both Marianne and Bob for the continuing work. I know this is a full-on commitment to the West Coast and to the communities around here, and I just wanted to express my gratitude once again.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And,
Thank you so much.
I wanted to share some information we received yesterday for Paulo and the ACRD team. We heard from Windsor Plywood yesterday that they sold 100 of the cart anchoring kits.
Oh, wow.
In terms of cement blocks with chain and carabiners. So we're hoping to keep that momentum going, and yeah, well done.
That's awesome. Bob, just quickly, is there any relationship either with SLEG or with Tofino Hardware Co-op for any of those kits?
We've actually are discussing with both co-ops, Windsor and SLEG, about potentially contributing some funding that would subsidize half the cost of anchoring materials through all 4 outlets for a limited amount of time. So it just to try and feed that momentum and encourage people to get out there and get what they need to secure their carts. So we're hoping that the co-ops are on board, and yeah, we're hoping it's all going to come together in the next day or so.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate everything. So moving on, we've got correspondence for information, and we have the ACRD Sort and Go. Here we go, right there. And I believe Jenny Brune, if she's in the house, if she would maybe like to have a couple of words regarding this.
I really would, and excellent timing, because I wanted to do a big thank you to WildSafe BC. I was just thinking back to meetings we had at the Ucluelet Community Center talking about what are we going to do for WildSafe? What is the exact correct mechanism we're going to need? How are we going to make sure that this program is as safe as possible and really successful? So WildSafe has been on board from the beginning and has helped us so much in our rollout in the last few days. We've also had Surfrider involved. We've had the PACs involved, and a big help from both Ucluelet and Tloquet First Nation. We expanded into the First Nations about a month ago, and so we put the carts in there and then started a curbside program for the very first time. And we've been struggling. There's labor shortages, so we've been having cart delays because we can't get the WildSafe hardware installed. And so the First Nations have really stepped up, and we've decided to do all local rollout for Tofino, Ucluelet, Millstream, and Albion. And that has been so good. Not only have they been just excellent at rolling out the carts, but they have such good information on the education program because they've had it in place for a month. So it seems to be going just so well. Definitely our staff, internal, Jody, Brenda, Paulo, everyone has just been working so hard. And then this is the first week of collection. So we attached the welcome package. This is really an opportunity to continue to promote the system. It sounds like it's going well. Jody popped in and she said she shed a small tear when she read the Facebook communication where it is the community providing the correct information to questions that the community is posing. And that is just the specialness that the West Coast can definitely, might be the only place on earth where that really happens. So it's all been so positive and such a success story. We are definitely, just so everyone's aware, we're still getting calls and inquiries. There are a few people who didn't get their carts because they actually aren't in the system. So this is helping us do some auditing. So we're tweaking those things. Sometimes people are making requests for changes. So we've got staff on our 1-800 number. So if you have any concerns, questions that you're hearing, just send them to the Sort and Go hotline. We've got people there to help and continue to please promote the system. Key messaging, of course, is secure those carts at all times, except on collection day. So when it's on collection day, unlock it, put those carabiners together, and then go and pick it up as soon as it's been tipped if you can, and bring it back in and re-secure that, because we want to make sure that it is safe for wildlife. Yeah, just a wonderful, that is one of the feeling best things that we get to do. So it's been really successful. We will have a complete report to the committee once we have the program rolling for a few months, so we can talk about what the diversion rates have been, because that's the most exciting part, to see how well people are adhering to the program. But it is so far early days, looking very good. So if there's any questions specific to the program, I can answer those now. We didn't put a report on the board, but it is very timely because it's starting this week. So.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Oh, if there's anybody that's got some questions for Jenny while we've got her right here on the Sort and Go, that'd be great. I got a couple comments, but.
I have a question about the anchors. I hadn't heard about that. So is what we're supposed to do or advised to do is keep them outside anchored?
Well, timely, because we have WildSafe here. I'm going to let them speak exactly to this because they are the experts. And then I'm not miscommunicating anything. So maybe Marianne, if you wanted to jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah, so what we've been promoting is if people have space indoors for their carts, that is still the best place to secure them. So if anyone has a garage or any, inside their homes is the best spot. What we want to discourage is people keeping carts inside a shed, for example, because we know and seen in the presentation, there's been a lot of sheds that have been broken into by bears. So if people don't have the ability to keep those carts indoors, it's to keep them outside. Obviously with the 2 clips secured on top for the compost and garbage bin. And then anchoring them in a way that a bear cannot drag them away. So the way that there's a few different ways of doing that. It can be on a structural post. It can be on anything that's really secure around the home. But if people don't have access to that, there's also pier blocks that can be bought either in Ucluelet at Windsor Plywood or Slag in Tofino or wherever anybody is based. I'm sure there's hardware stores that would sell those. And basically they have a hole in the middle where a chain can be threaded through, and those can go all around looped into the 3 carts. And then clip together with a sturdy carabiner. So when you need to use the carts, you just need to unlock the carabiner and bring it to the curb. There's nothing that needs to be done with anything else. But when they're all secured together, it is a really kind of a struggle for a bear to drag everything away. So by keeping everything secure and by having that, it's adding that layer of safety. And then for the recycling cart, what we're also just asking is to really make sure that everything is really nice and clean, since there's no bear resistant component to that specific bin.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from committee? I just wanted to point out, Jenny, that I called the 1-800 number. My long-term renter here and ordered carts, and had with less than 24 hours, those carts were delivered and at the renter's doorstep. So the system is working as designed, and this is an incredible success for the West Coast. And I cannot thank the ACRD staff and everyone. I won't list them all, but you know who they are. And I think they've really done an incredible job, not just here on the West Coast, but certainly in the Alberni Valley as well. So this is a great success story, and I hope to continue into the future. So thank you very much. So moving on, we have another set of correspondence from the Environment and Climate Change Canada. It's a field report, the Salish Sea Gull project. And it was a great piece of information. I've worked on these projects before, and in fact, I reported some of the banding sightings that were right here in Tofino, fortunately. So for those that are geeked out on this kind of stuff, it's an excellent report. And some of the California gull work that's been done in terms of where they migrate and stuff, fascinating. So I'll leave it at that, unless there's any other comments on that. So coming up next on the agenda, request for decision regarding the Tloquet First Nation and ACRD 3-year MOU to develop a LBA protocol agreement. And I believe, would it be Jenny? Yes, that will be speaking to this one. I see you up there.
Thank you, Chair. So we've received a presentation from Saya Masso on June 1st at the West Coast Committee meeting. For new directors, it is recorded, so you're able to go back and view that if you like. It's an excellent presentation and provides a lot of details. But in summary, Saya was giving us a bit of background information and had proposed a draft protocol agreement with Tloquet and the ACRD for some issues for partnership on the airport, the Long Beach Airport. So a lot of the objectives really do align with what we are looking to achieve. And we see it as an excellent opportunity to look at how we can collaborate on airport development and initiatives. The Vancouver Airport has a friendship agreement with the Musqueam Indian Band, and we see that as an excellent sort of example of where we could be moving forward to. However, looking at a long-term agreement, we see that as a lot of time and energy to invest in making sure that we have all of the principles aligned and that we're happy moving forward. We also have a number of immediate issues that we need to address, such as the development of a long-term land use plan. We have some long-term leases that we need to have First Nation consultation and engagement on. So staff considered really putting together a short-term memorandum of agreement so that we can start working towards that longer agreement. And we felt that if we could establish just 3 years, we could look at working on the long-term land use plan and making sure that we have full engagement and participation. We would be able to look at some of the lease applications that we're receiving. Also, the communication and signage at the airport terminal could be something we could do. And then the key being is take that time to really develop the long-term agreement. ACRD staff time for the investment in creating that agreement will be provided under the service. However, the Tloquet First Nation would not have a revenue stream that could cover their staff or leadership time. So we looked at that, and because we do want to make sure that there is participation, we considered for those 3 years that we would look at providing funding, annual funding of $27,500. And we would generate that revenue. So it wouldn't be out of our existing operating budget, but we would look at increasing our passenger fees from $5 to $7.50. So an increase of $2.50 per passenger to basically fund that project. For an example, when we looked at the other airports and what they're charging for passenger fees and airport improvement fees, Tofino is very much on the low end. If we increase those passenger fees by $2.50, we would still be basically not competing ourselves out. Also keeping in mind that, $2.50 per passenger is a relatively small amount. So it would have a nominal effect on flight prices. And that would be able to raise enough money, which is the $27,500 based on what we expect for revenue in 2023. So we feel this project really aligns with the strategic priority for developing First Nation protocol agreements. And we are recommending that the board support entering into, well, I think sending a letter to enter into a memorandum of agreement with Tloquet First Nation. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Looking to the committee, if there are any questions or comments, you can just speak up. Your pictures are very small on my screen, so if I miss you, hi Marilyn. Yeah, I can see you on there. Great. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Would SAIA be the signatory on this document?
For the memorandum of understanding, I think we would be sending a letter to Tloquet First Nation, and it would likely be their chief who would be entering into, as well as our director of the board. So the ACRD board director and then their elected chief.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments from the committee or questions of staff? Veda, go ahead. You are muted. Yeah,
They're trying to unmute. Okay, sorry. I think it was the proposal is well thought out. I think it's great. Well done.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for staff? I just want to quickly say I agree with Veda. This is an excellent opportunity to create the relationships that we've been talking about around inclusion of the First Nations, specifically Tloquet in this these land management questions. I just was curious in terms of the MOU to set the framework, and then moving forward some of the big picture projects, the long-term land use plan, the long-term lease agreements. And then there's the shorter wins, I guess you could call them, around communication and signage. And then at the end of the 3-year MOU, would there be a more formalized protocol agreement that would be established?
Yes, I think that it'll be interesting to see what we come up with, because you know, what SAIA had proposed and was one version of this, and I think that we would be looking at what they're presenting in their details. What would the long-term is there a long-term financial mechanism? Like, what does that look like? I think we really want to open that up in those discussions over 3 years. And then I would hope that we would be able to come back before the end of the 3-year period to propose what a long-term agreement might look like to the committee and board, and then tweak that, finalize that, and have that in place to basically replace the memorandum of understanding before the end, at the end of the term.
Thank you. I expect that was the case. And then I just wanted a quick comment that, or maybe a quick question around the increase in the passenger fee. It was a minimal $2.50. Was that based on just on a reflection of what the projected cost might be to support Tloquet in their staffing abilities to participate in this? Because I would propose slightly higher, but it's probably was based on some thought process. So I'll leave it at that for now. Great, thank you, Jenny. If there's no other comments or questions, I can move from the chair that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors send a letter to the Tloquet First Nation to offer to set up a 3-year memorandum of understanding to develop an agreement for the Long Beach Airport and provide $27,500 annual funding to achieve the objectives of the MOU.
Second.
Thank you, Marilyn. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. And that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors approve the updating of the Tofino Airport bylaw fees to increase passenger fees to $7.50.
Second.
Thank you, Marilyn. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Next up on the agenda is the Long Beach Airport Land Use and Development Plan. And I'm looking to Jenny again, I suspect, on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and these are related conversations. So the Long Beach Land Use Management Plan is really one of these key documents that we know we need to do. So we have a lot of interest in continued development at the airport, and we do not have a land use plan that is up to date and relevant and reflects what we feel the community and partners and communities on the West Coast really want to see. So we want to go out and engage with all of those communities, come up with a good plan and a good vision, and then a development plan to move forward. One of the key items with an airport, it is very expensive to operate our airport and intensive. And we know that the lands are, and developing those lands are going to provide us with a good revenue source moving forward. But right now, without clear direction on what we are supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be managing the land, it is very difficult to be giving guidance and direction to the community or anyone who's interested in development. Do we want to turn this into a massive RV park? Maybe. That's, like, probably not, but it would be nice to get direction from the communities to see what they would like. We have been talking about this with the West Coast Committee for the last year, and there was support to move forward with doing an updated plan. And they had asked us to go back and look at the staffing resources required in order to undertake the plan. Just as a summary of what that planning process will look like is we are going to do basically data collection and review. We will create a stakeholder and steering committee for this, as well as making sure we have all of our key partners involved. But we do need technical expertise from consultants who work on airport plans, because we want them to bring that to the table and let us see, what is the possibility for what the airport will look like in 50 years, and then how do we roll that back to come up with a comprehensive plan to move forward. Again, lots of options and engagement, discussing those. What are the implications? How does that align? Is it going to be good? And then preparing a draft plan. So we'll be working with a steering committee and also the West Coast Committee, which will be the guiding committee for this. And then eventually it will go to the board of directors for approval. We foresee, sort of as we're doing our project planning, we're looking to do an RFP process to engage a consultant, but we do also need staff time for leading this. A lot of the time is making sure that we are getting the people involved, and an external consultant simply, like, it's far too expensive to hire an external person to coordinate and facilitate that, as well as making sure that we have the resources internally, that we're providing the valid background information, that we are making sure that it aligns with what we know we have internally. So we're estimating that that is about a quarter of a full-time staff equivalent, and it's probably going to be a 2-year process. That's fairly accurate to what we've seen for other plans of this scale, and it is a large scale project. With that being said, we have a half FTE, a half full-time equivalent, or a half position vacancy, which was our previous environmental services coordinator position. And so we split that position up. Half of it was for solid waste, and we added an additional half to focus on achieving our solid waste objectives. And then we have not refilled that half-time vacancy because a number of issues, but a lot of it is that it is very hard to get good candidates for part-time work. And we knew we had some other components and pieces coming through. So we looked at this. And so if we have a half-time vacancy, we have another 0.25 that we need just to focus on this land use management planning. And we really have so many other initiatives that we need to be tackling at the airport. I can go through the list. I talked a bit about it in the orientation. The amount of time and energy that we spend with leases, and we really need to continue to move that process forward to make it more consistent. We need to work on better reporting. It just, the list really goes on in that area. So what we're recommending is that we create a 2-year term position for airport projects management and basically guidance and coordination on this and a number of other airport stuff, just to focus on the Long Beach Airport. And we did look at different options, whether we made it a permanent position, but we really feel that just a 2-year term position will give us enough time to make sure that we're working and focusing on getting this land use plan done. We also really need to do a better staffing assessment for operations, and I want to see what that looks like. Where do we need to allocate resources for the long term for the airport to make sure we are achieving our safety and operational objectives? And we've seen some very good candidates for 2-year term positions. So if we made it full-time, it might make it more attractive, but we are seeing a lot of good applicants for 2-year terms. So we don't think that that's actually going to be a drawback for us in attracting quality staff to the position. Financially, we received $180,000 in grant relief funding. And I think that was back in 2021, and we were able to basically apply that to some of our ongoing operational costs, which allowed us to create a surplus and carry forward money. We still have $165,000 that we've tagged to complete our land use and development plan, as well as work on the terminal expansion study. So we have funding available. We also have a grant opportunity. We never say no to grants. Thank you to our new grants coordinator who is finding all of these opportunities for the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. And we think we are likely, we think we have a relatively good chance of success in getting funding for this. And that is basically focusing on rural economic development and land use management planning and guiding us for expanding land use and basically economic activities at the airport should fit right in with their criteria. So we're also recommending that we put an application forward for that grant program. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jenny, and I'll look to the committee to see if there's any questions or comments. I do have a few, I think the explanation reading through the report was very clear and precise, and I want to thank you for the follow-up from 2021 when staff were given direction to move this long-term planning process forward and identifying the needs that will be necessary to bring that forward. So thank you very much. And so just so that I'm clear in terms of the 165,000, let's call it carryover or surplus, could be used to finance that 2-year term position. Is that would be correct? And then the 100,000 grant, which I agree fits very nicely with what we're looking at here. Would that be then be able to be utilized for that consultant if successful in that RFP process and to bring that forward? So in essence, there'd be little to no I hate to use the word tax burden because I think it's tax obligation, but so that would limit that that obligation that might come forward in terms of the requests that may be made from a taxation perspective.
That is correct. Thank you, Chair. But I would like to add that with the airports, we have a lot of moving parts and pieces happening, and we're just preparing draft budgets right now. A lot of it is really related to the infrastructure. So you will be seeing, and we will bring the budget forward to the committee for review, and you will have the ability to look at that and make some decisions. But we are going to be recommending more money be put into the infrastructure, basically capital reserve, so that we can work on more projects because of that. So yes, I feel very strongly that the airport projects coordinator is not going to be creating a tax increase, but we are going to be having a big discussion about the value of investing in this and creating these plans so that eventually we do want to support more development to reduce the burden on taxation. That is our long-term plan. But currently I still see a massive infrastructure gap, and we're going to be making some strong recommendations for taxes for that.
Great, thank you, Jenny, because that was the next question that I had moving forward in terms of the asset management and what we're looking at in those long-term pictures in terms of reserve fund and being able to put away for the future, which we know these things are coming forward with the age and the massive amount of infrastructure that's out there. So that's great to hear that will be included, and hopefully probably in that long-term planning process, we'll start developing those frameworks for those contributions, maybe to, I don't know the specific name for our reserve fund for that, but that we're really thinking of that asset management perspective. So great to hear. And so you've answered that question. I won't bother bringing that forward. So if there are no other comments from the committee, seeing none from the chair, I'll move that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve a 2-year term position for an airport project coordinator.
Second.
Thank you for that. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carried. That the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors direct staff to submit a grant application for the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program for the Long Beach Airport Land Use and Development Plan Project.
Second.
Thank you for that. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Now moving on to the West Coast Transit, next steps and options. Looking forward to this, and I'm not sure who will be on this one. Is it Pablo or?
This will be Eddie.
Eddie, sorry, I meant Eddie, sorry. Thank you, Eddie.
No worries, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so at the October 6th, 2022 meeting, a report was brought to the West Coast Committee communicating what was communicated by the provincial government in regard to West Coast Transit funding for the 23-24 fiscal year, and the fact that funding would most likely not be available. In that report and in that discussion, staff has communicated that they would look for alternative measures and begin the process of investigating what interim measures could and would be, with the long-term goal that the most sustainable service would ultimately be the BC Transit-led service. In that time, staff have reached out to Watt Consulting, who is an experienced transit consultant, province-wide and in Alberta as well. So they've worked on various projects of similar size and scope, including the Black Diamond project in Alberta, and they're currently working with the Strathcona Regional District on a project for transportation for their West Coast communities as well. So very experienced, very good company and consultant. So we're looking for support, the West Coast Committee, to move forward with this transit study, the alternative option study, which will identify, those interim options with community partnerships, resources, etc., that can be used on an interim basis. The consultants, we've worked out costs to complete investigating options to determine interim solutions would approximately be $12,500 for the phase 1 approach. Included in this would be a review of the existing plans worked out with BC Transit, gathering and updating of community level information in order to clarify the resources and partnerships available and how these can be engaged on an interim basis. The consultants we would also be working with the West Coast Transportation Group, which has been started up again, and keeping those conversations going and moving forward as a partnership and seeing what we could do. We've also put within the report a recommendation to create a budget with no tax requisition for 2023. We currently have $251,000 in the operating reserves, plus approximately $18,000 in operating surplus that we can use towards any of the necessary pre-implementation work and the consultant work. The consultant work as a phase 1 would be the investigation of the interim options. And then we would present those findings to the West Coast Committee. They're also able to provide, which I think is a great benefit, is if we find an option that would work, some implementation support. This is one of the items that BC Transit would support, the startup and implementation of a service that would be of great benefit to the service. So if we agreed on a model and move forward with a second phase, implementation support would likely come in around $18,000, depending on the level of support necessary. In looking at this, other options considered would be to potentially put the project on hold until that provincial funding is confirmed. And then in the meantime, use the existing funds to continue with the bus stop development so that infrastructure is ready when the service can become operational. I do think that, and working and talking with the West Coast Working Group, that this is a service that we want to get off the ground in some way, shape, or form as soon as possible and provide the necessary transportation to the residents of the West Coast. So those are our recommendations, and I'm definitely open to any questions and conversation surrounding them.
Great, thank you, Eddie. Appreciate the report. I'll look to the committee once again if there's any comments. Marilyn, I see your mute's come off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the financing. My CAO, Dwayne, and I met with Cheryl McClay on Monday from the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, and we talked about transportation at great length because it's really high on our wish list. And she was pretty sure that the Rural Economic Development Infrastructure Program had an arm that would cover a feasibility study for looking at alternate transportation. Just wondering if that's something, I know you're applying for it for the airport feasibility, but could it also be applied for this project? Because I think each district is allowed up to 3 applications.
I see a bunch of nods, so I think that's great. Yes, we had kind of discussed that. We think that the Long Beach Airport project is larger financially than the feasibility portion of the transit. And we can apply for multiple as a regional district, but not multiple for the same area. So because this would be for the same geographical area, we aren't allowed to apply for more than one. I think because we have that surplus sitting there that we think we can use for the West Coast Transit, and because we think this is going to be around, I think, Eddie, around 20,000 instead of the 100 plus, we were thinking that was more of a viable option, but we could take it back to consider. We have to bring this to the board next week anyways for final approval, so we could look into that a little bit more and bring back that discussion next week if you like.
Yes, that would be great. And the other option we discussed was the possibility of using electric buses because there's a lot of grant money available for green energy. And so she was going to send me more information about that, but it's just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marilyn. We'll look to the committee if there's any other questions or comments. I certainly want to thank Eddie and the team there for the work on this. I did have a question in terms, and I think Marilyn alluded to some of the conversation going around that, so I won't reiterate that. But I was curious, Eddie, in terms of the, we know that in terms of the surplus that we have and available to use, and with the anticipation that into the future that BC Transit will be our primary provider for this service, I'm wondering if it's not too complex, is the ability to move forward with some of that bus stop infrastructure concurrently as we move forward, or is that just complicating things too much in terms of not having a firm understanding of what BC Transit might be doing in the future and what the potential needs are for maybe this transitory service that's being potentially proposed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think this is work, when we look at what work we want to do, we want to keep that long-term vision in mind and make sure that any work that we're doing now will be work that will also be necessary with the BC Transit run service. So we're not wasting resources as we move forward. I think when we talk about something like bus stop implementation, and some of the work that would be necessary, I think there are some of the stops and some of the infrastructure that we can move forward with working concurrently. I think the one thing we want to be careful about is not getting in a situation where we're using up that reserve and then we get to a point where Watts Consulting completes their work and has a finding where with an interim solution, but we've used up some of that operating reserve, right? So I think we just want to be careful about moving forward with that work, but there are definitely a couple stops that can be highlighted and necessary infrastructure that can be worked on.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Eddie. That was, it's kind of what I was alluding to. The work had already been done, and I think we were looking at moving forward already with the implementation of some of those bus stops previous to getting the announcement from the ministry. And so we had that sort of plan in place, and I'd identified those specific areas that we could move forward on. So thank you for that. I'll look to the board if there was anything, to the committee to see if there was anything moving. Any questions? Great. So from the chair then, I'll make the motion that the West Coast Committee support the undertaking of an alternative option study for public transit on the West Coast.
Second.
Thank you, Marilyn. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. And that the West Coast Committee direct staff to include a budget with no 2023 tax requisition for the West Coast Transit Service for the investigation and possible implementation of an alternative public transit solution in the draft 2023 to 2027 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan.
Second.
Thank you, Marilyn. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Great. So next on the agenda, we have reports of our ex officio members and or updates. And I see that we do have a few in the house here. Is there any reports coming from any of those members? Dave, I see your hand up there. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my name is Dave Toll. I'm the acting superintendent at Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, and just want to apologize. I was on the public site right at 10 o'clock, so it took me a while to get in as a panelist. But just a couple items that we just want to bring to the committee's attention is that we are heavily involved in management planning right now for the National Park Reserve. So as per discussions with the 9 nations with territories within Pacific Rim, we're doing it on a unit by unit basis. So we're meeting with the 3 West Coast Trail nations, and then with the 4 Broken Group Island nations, and then the 2 Long Beach unit nations. It'll be one management plan with kind of 3 different unit-based approaches, but under one envelope. So very heavily detailed. There will be public consultations coming up, in about a year's time and so forth. But just wanted to get that on everyone's radar that we will be reaching out to the districts and the ACRD and various members of the public and interest groups and partners and stakeholders. Second point I want to bring up is just with the recent winter storm event that we had out here on the West Coast that we're not totally used to. We're just in discussions with our contractor about the maintenance on Highway 4 and the service level that was provided. So, and lastly, just on behalf of Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, I just want to appreciate the working relationship and the personal and professional relationships we have with the West Coast Committee, the First Nations, the districts, the ACRD, and most importantly, the staff as well. So, and just wish everyone all the best, safe holidays and happy holidays and all the best in the new year. So thank you very much, Chair.
Right. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the report. If there's any questions for Dave, or I just had a quick one, Dave. If regarding, we had challenges in terms of the snow removal on our multiple use path and all the debris and everything. You have a quite a bit longer of a path through the park there. Was that a challenging endeavor with the amount of snowfall and debris that had come down?
Yeah, definitely, Chair. Especially with the Upshiktashi is meanders in and out of the forest, so it's a lot more sheltered as well, so it doesn't get the direct sunlight. So what we are doing is we are coming up with a level of service so we can kind of what our winter offer is on the trail. So always use caution, be more prepared after a storm event or when the temperature gets below a certain temperature. So ongoing challenges as it's a relatively new trail, so we're learning as we go, but really educating people on what to expect before they even get onto the pathways is our next step.
Great, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. And if there's anyone else in the house from our members that would like to report, I don't see any on my participant list. Seeing none other, I don't believe there's any late business, and I'll look to staff to see if there were any questions from our wonderful public for the West Coast Committee.
There have been no questions from the public today.
Great, thanks, Jen. So with that in mind, we'll move into in camera, and the reason we're going to do that is motion to close the meeting to the public as per the Community Charter Sections 91. Information that is prohibited or information that, if it were presented in a document, would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and 21(1)(ii) of the FOIPA would reveal commercial, financial, labor relations, scientific, or technical information of or about a third party. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Marilyn.